unravel the myths around spiritual awakening. Today, I want to talk about the spiritual lies that keep you stuck. This is a new series I'm starting. And the topics we're going to go over today are spiritual bypassing, the empath's trap, hypervigilance equals intuition, and of course, the false white light. So let's start with a topic that is very well known in the metaphysical community, yet quite widely unheard of by everyone else, the false white light. So this is a spiritualist term or an esoteric term that explains a phenomenon wherein there is a deception in the astral realms, in the super consciousness, if you will, or the etheric spaces. This also covers near-death experiences, and many of us believe that when you cross over, you will be accessing the false white light if you do not know better. Now, the false white light is also connected to mind control. It brings in the topics of reincarnation and what I love to call the reincarnation recycle station, though other people call the false ascension matrix. And this is correlated with negative interdimensionals, or another way to say it would be negative alien entities. And also it is known to prevent ascension. So the false white light is an entire movement that I perceive was started by Lady Blavatsky. And when the more New Age concepts came into play, from my take, and I've been in this industry for over 20 years now. My first 10 plus years were deep into the false white light. If any of you guys watching are my homies from way back when I started this channel, you will know that I have pulled probably over 100 videos that I made because they're immersed in the false white light. And I don't want to offer practices and teachings that I no longer align with. So, talking about the false white light, it's important to understand that there are a lot of entities. Maybe we talk about the ascended masters. Angels can fall into this category. Many different types of beings or entities that people communicate with, those that perceive they're channeling or talking to other entities or beings that have powers and that reside in the etheric realms. Often it is that those communications that come through are actually not the beings that are believed to be connecting with. So this is the reason I put out a lot of videos where I am very vehemently opposed to channeling. I think it's a very dangerous thing to do. A lot of us do it. It can come very sporadically and naturally to many people, though when trying to tune in and connect with other entities or beings, even those that have just crossed over, you're never going to know what you're going to get. And the most common thing that you're going to experience, in my experience of 20 years of channeling, is that you'll tap into the entities that are just above our physical realm. They're just residing in the etheric plane in a fourth dimensional space that is a denser frequency than one would want to be accessing if they're actually tuning into very high level beings such as archangels. And these beings have no problem lying and telling all sorts of stories. In addition to that, if you're not connecting with an actual etheric entity, you may simply be connecting with those that I simply term and deem the controllers. The mind control, handling experiences that have been happening for decades that are actually starting to become much more public now that the CIA is being made to disclose a lot of things that have been redacted from the public for a very long time. Now, the false white light can be very dangerous because it opens people up to entity attachments, to all sorts of negative spiritual warfare. And I'll go into it in another video on this series, but to me, this also ties into Kundalini and how that is a trap for looshing your energy. Loosh is a word that we use when we talk about draining energy. And because the Kundalini siphon is set up in a way where the energy is moving through your chakra system, it's enclosed, and therefore if it's accessed by any other beings that know how to access one's loosh, they can simply drain it right out as if it were a straw. So what I lovingly call the reincarnation recycle station. This used to be a technology that was off of the moon. Now, science has proven that the moon is not a naturally occurring celestial body. It has been rung like a bell. It is unnaturally perfectly round. And this is information that's actually widely publicly distributed, though shockingly still not well known. When the machinery and technology was a bit more archaic, many of us believe that the moon was where the etheric being, when the soul would leave the body, you would move towards a technology that's magnetized by the moon, how the moon has such a very strong magnetic pull on our energy, in the waters on our planet and in our body. And through that technology, just like if we look at the album where it's the pyramid and the rainbow going through the pyramid, that is meant to talk about the etheric color spectrum and the soul and the energies moving through the trapped energy on the dark side of the moon. And in that space, if a soul didn't know what to do, they don't know how to advocate for themselves, they don't actually have to go towards the light. They don't have to go towards the light or the light that they're being shown. If they don't know how to advocate for themselves, they get pulled into what I lovingly term the reincarnation recycle station. Now the technology is a lot more advanced. We've got satellites and all sorts of things going on now. And so it doesn't have to, the soul doesn't necessarily get pulled any longer to a physical location. Things are done a lot more through the simulation. Now, the negative interdimensionals also like to take advantage of the false white light. They very happily will come in and play, the face or the voice of a type of being or an entity that's being idolized over many, many decades or eons or centuries, what have you. A lot of, in my perspective, what people term as ascended masters, even false entities taking on the role of archangels and beings that have a higher level in the hierarchies, as are believed to be in our books of religious studies. They take on the facade of this, and or the entities that have an extremely long lifespan comparatively to one human life has actually gone through different rounds of being different beings that have held a stature or a standing throughout the different epochs or what have you, that were then written into these religious texts and have been relegated to being, gods, goddesses, higher beings, what have you, because they have interdimensional tools and technologies that we don't have or hasn't been offered to the public. It's easy for someone to deem them as a higher being with much more power and not understand that this is actually an advanced society or a technology, not simply some magic or powers. The false white light is also designed to prevent ascension. So there are a lot of people and animals as well that choose to opt into reincarnation, moving through the belief that they are chained to or bound to their karmic implications, though there is a indoctrination around this that actually it doesn't require so much karmic baggage to pull out of this reincarnation recycle station being bound to Earth, so to speak. Though if you don't know any better, you might just end up in that loop, right? On the rat wheel, if you will. So the next topic I wanted to talk about is spiritual bypassing. Now, spiritual bypassing is a term that was coined by a psychotherapist in the 1980s named John Welwood. And he was a Buddhist and a therapist who noticed a propensity in a lot of spiritual people that had a tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices that would sidestep or avoid facing their unresolved emotional issues, perhaps their psychological wounds, and also their unfinished developmental tasks. And this is an excerpt I pulled out of Brave search engine AI to sum it up. Now, spiritual bypassing is very common. I think it's something that people don't understand. They might perceive it to be only utilized by people who are spiritual, but it happens often in everyday nomenclature. So this could be something like, oh, it's for the best, or they're in a better place. These are both examples of spiritual bypassing. But of course, it can take extremes, which I've seen quite thoroughly and experienced on my own end, where you believe so thoroughly into these hierarchies and structures of metaphysics and spirituality, karma, ascension. This could be the dark night of the soul. Ideas like this that maybe our suffering and our struggle have such a thorough purpose, it has a meaning. Now, of course, it has a meaning because it exists, but a lot of spiritualists like to believe that they are suffering solely because they were meant to go through something. Well, you can choose to go through things, hence the reason why you have free will in opting into your own karmic implications, because, karma is causality and it's action-reaction. But it's not necessarily that you're meant to go through it. It could just be this is what you've bitten off because you haven't learned certain lessons to get out of the karmic debt. And it's a defense mechanism. Spiritual bypassing is simply a spiritually influenced defense mechanism. It's very akin to rationalization, to deciding that something that's happening is happening for a logical reason, seemingly, as opposed to being honest and real about the suffering that's being experienced. It can often be dissociative, where we don't want to face reality. We simply explain it away. And in addition, this can be an experience where, we're sublimating. We're not able to take our responsibility, so we have to play it off in some other way. Urban Alchemist, hi, how are you? Thank you so much. You're saying this is a great topic. I'm grateful to be caught in this live stream. Hope all is well. I hope the same to you. I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you for joining me. So spiritual bypassing is very broad. It's a really broad umbrella term that can have a lot of different factors playing in. Though some pretty obvious spiritual bypassing could be the movements where people are only focused on manifestation or the law of attraction, right? That they're so rigidly focused on that they have to stay in a gratitude mindset and positive. And if they move out of that space, then they're not being a good spiritual practitioner, or that something might happen to them immediately. But the reality of life is that we're emotional beings. And if we're not acknowledging and embracing our emotions, then we're not living in the now moment and the reality of what's actually happening.